Before we start, a quick note. I've launched a new podcast called How Words Work. It looks at how the language used in lying and manipulation also shows up in everyday communication, often without people realising. And when you use that language, even honestly, it changes how people hear you. If you want to understand how to remove those signals from your own speech to sound clearer, more authoritative and more credible, that's what this new show is all about. You can find How Words Work with Jack Fox on all podcast platforms, like where you are now. Right, let's go to this episode. Lacey Peterson was missing, and her husband Scott went on TV, on national television, not to beg for her return, not to share some new updates, but to perform innocence and watch the language. That's where he cracked.
I think everybody sitting at home wants the answer to the same question. Did you murder your wife?
No, I did not. And I had absolutely nothing to do with her disappearance.
Welcome to Never a Truer Word, where we look at the words that people choose to use to see if they're telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. If you're new to this channel, what I do here is different from anywhere else because I ignore everything apart from the words said by the person at the centre of the story. And then I analyse those words to find the truth hidden inside them. It's a process that I use with investigators, with corporate clients, and with the media to get a deep understanding of what is really being said. So let's have a look at Scott Peterson. Let's bring him onto the team for Never a Truer Word because he's going to deliver a masterclass in the language of image management and narrative management as well. Because this was a big deal for him. This was him appearing on national television. His big chance to persuade the country of his innocence. He will have prepared beforehand, but he will have been extremely nervous as well. And the truth, as we'll see, will come through inside his words. And as we're listening to Scott, I want you to listen out for one thing. The phrase, you know. He uses you know a lot in this interview. See if you can spot when he uses it and maybe work out why he uses it. So let's listen to Scott Peterson talking to Diane Sawyer. And first of all, she asks the big question.
I think everybody sitting at home wants the answer to the same question. Did you murder your wife?
No, I did not. And I had absolutely nothing to do with her disappearance. And use the word murder, and yeah, I mean, that is a possibility. It's not one we're ready to accept, and it creeps in my mind late at night and early in the morning. And during the day, all we can think about is the right resolution is to find her well.
But as you know, increasingly, in the public, suspicion has turned on you.
Yes, definitely.
Did you ever hit her? Did you ever injure her?
No. My God, no. Violence towards women is unapproachable. It is the most disgusting act to me. And I know that suspicion has turned to me. And it's turned to me, one, because I'm her husband. And that's a natural thing. And I've heard all the statistics on all the news shows about that being, someone that a husband, ex-husband, a boyfriend, that is statistically the one who would be responsible for her disappearance. And I'm sorry, I forgot your question.
Did you ever hit her? Did you ever injure her?
No, never. I was answered your question because of the suspicion that it's been turned to me. And it turned to me because of the inappropriate romantic that I had with Amber Friday.
Right, let's bring it in. Let's look at his words and let's dig into what he says. Look, we know he murdered Lacey and also the unborn child, but how does he talk around that fact and try to persuade people of what it is that he wants to persuade people of, that he's a nice guy? So the big question there, I think everybody sitting at home wants the answer to the same question. Did you murder your wife? Asked Diane Sawyer. And that word murder has been highlighted by me for a reason. He says no. He doesn't just say no once. He says no twice. That indicates a need to persuade. Now, at this moment, look, if we were just watching this, People would have a need to persuade if they were innocent. If I was innocent and everyone was suspecting me of killing my wife, then I would be wanting to be persuasive. So I would say something like, no, even if I was innocent. But we can see he needs to persuade here. And we're going to see that a lot as he talks. Then he says, I did not. Not I didn't, but I did not. Now, that's the formal way of saying it. And often, when people are lying, they think that by being more formal, they will be more believable. That just being slangy and kind of casual about it and saying, I didn't, won't be believable enough. So they formalize their language. I did not. So that's a data point there from him. And then he says, I had absolutely nothing to do with her disappearance. Look at that word absolutely. I point it out so often because it appears in deception so often. It doesn't need to be there. That sentence would be the exact same meaning if he said, and I had nothing to do with her disappearance. But he feels again that need to persuade by saying, I had absolutely nothing to do with her disappearance. And when someone says absolutely, it doesn't mean they're lying, but it is an indicator deception could be happening. So we dig into the words around it. Nothing to do with her disappearance. Interestingly, bad people, I find, often don't just deny the fact and say, no, I did not murder my wife, or I didn't murder my wife would be better, well spotted. But they say nothing to do with it, as in the fact that they could have had something to do with it, but someone else did the bad stuff, or there was two of us and I wasn't involved. That nothing to do. Now, look, if someone says I had nothing to do with it, then it doesn't mean they're lying. But again, it's a strange indicator, this wording, because what he could have said was, no, I didn't murder my wife. But he says, no, I did not. And I had absolutely nothing to do with her disappearance. Now, that's why I highlighted that word murder in the question. The question was, did you murder her wife? And he says, I had nothing to do with the disappearance. Changing the frame of the question somewhat and softening the accusation put to him. Murder was the accusation put to him, and he's downplayed it to disappearance. Again, something that guilty people often do. So look, woof! Straight away, one question, did you murder your wife? And I can see a need to persuade. I can see him formalizing his language. I can see him being persuasive with words like absolutely, saying nothing to do, and softening the severity of what he's accused of with disappearance. And if you also notice, he uses an and there. So let's just assume, did you murder my wife? And by no, I did not, means that I didn't murder my wife. And I had nothing to do with her disappearance, as if they are two separate things. And then he says, and use the word murder. And yeah, that is a possibility. He's stumbling over his words here. Now, I said he would have prepared for this. He would have stories prepared to tell, but the questions never come the way you think they're going to come, or the words don't come out your mouth the way you think they're going to come out. Come on, which of us has not been ready to say something when we know we're going to get questioned, and the nerves just make us go, bah, yeah, and a whole load of gibberish comes out. That's what makes it so hard for him to explain and flow with the words that are going on there. So he mentions, the possibility of murder. And then he says, it's not one we're ready to accept. Now, he's not talking just for himself there. He's letting us know he's talking for other people. It's not one we're ready to accept. Who's the we? He doesn't say. And then he says something a bit strange. It creeps in my mind late at night. So he's just talking for himself. It creeps in my mind late at night. So we're not ready to accept it, but in my mind late at night is these thoughts of murder. That's pretty grim when you think about it. And then he decides to widen that out. So it's not just late at night when he's dropping into his mind or creeping into his mind. It's early in the morning. And during the day. Well, that's 24 blooming hours there that it's creeping into his mind. So this is not hanging together again. It's not just I think about it all the time, or it's a worry that's always at the back of my mind. It's just a contradiction. It creeps into my mind late at night. In fact, it creeps into my mind during the day. All we can think about is the right resolution to find her. Well, this answer fades out. He's not committed or certain about what it is he's saying. He's flapping. He's probably doing a swan where he's trying to appear graceful and calm and laid back as he's answering the questions, but his brain is moving at 100 miles an hour and it can't cope. It can't cope with the thinking and the amount of time to send the words to his mouth. All we can think about, so again, he's speaking for other people, is the right resolution to find her, which is a very formal way of saying it. It's not all we can think about is finding her. All we can think about is getting her to safety or anything like that. No, It's much more formal. The right resolution is to find her well. And find her is interesting. That is saying that Lacey's not going to come home of her own accord. I see this all the time in guilty people who have a missing person case where they've been responsible for that person going missing, but they're pretending, don't know what happened. Is they talk about finding the person, not reaching the person, not hoping the person comes home. It's all about finding her. But also, like he says it there, that all we can think about is the right resolution, which is finding her. But also he says he's thinking about the thought of murder. So there's more contradictions in what he says there. Then Diane Sawyer asks him, but as you know, increasingly in the public, suspicion has turned on you. And Scott says, yes, definitely. Whoa, a much shorter answer than that other one. Did you murder your wife? Where we got an essay in reply. This is short, succinct, and deals with the question. Yes, definitely suspicion has turned on me. This is what the truth sounds like. And, he can't deny suspicion is on him. So it's in his interest just to be honest here. And by God, even when we're Scott Peterson, we much prefer being honest because it's much easier. And that's why being honest here is not a problem. Just say, yes, definitely. Diane then goes in for some big questions. Did you ever hit her? Did you ever injure her? And he says, no, my God, no. That's more than just the 2 no's before. That's 3 no's and a my God. So again, this need to persuade. And I think also he needs to sound offended by the question. And so truthful people, just answer truthfully. But here he's trying to convey some emotion there. No, my God, no. Violence towards women is unapproachable. I don't know why he's used unapproachable. I think he means unacceptable or unconscionable or some unconscionable. Is that a word? You know what I mean. But unapproachable just feels like a misspeak there. But notice what he talks about. Violence towards women. Not violence towards Lacey, his wife. Not the thought of him injuring his wife or hurting his wife, just women in general. So he doesn't deal directly with the accusation or the question that's put to him. Did you hit her? Did you injure her? He just talks in general, saying that violence towards women is unapproachable. It's the most disgusting act to me. And I know suspicion has turned on me, and it's turned on me, one, because I'm her husband, which is interesting because he's talking in general about violence towards women, but then he goes very specific to him and says why the suspicion is on him. And he says, and that's a natural thing. He's now trying to sell us a story here that the husband being found suspicious is a natural thing. And I've heard all the statistics on the news shows about that being, someone that husband, ex-husband, boyfriend. So he's talking very general here, not the husband or the boyfriend. It's husband, ex-boyfriend. That's statistically one who would be responsible for her disappearance. So he takes himself out of that explanation. It would be fair to say that statistically, me would be the person responsible than statistics, but those statistics are rubbish. That's what he could say. Instead, he takes himself out of it and goes, husband, but could be responsible for her disappearance. I talked about that cognitive overload that he was undergoing. And I'm sorry, I forgot your question, is what he said. Did you ever hit her? Did you ever injure her? The question is repeated. And he goes again, no, never. And never is another one of those deceptive words. If you look at the real life use of never in the dictionary means not at any time, but we say that so often and don't mean not at any time. We mean it in a very limited or quantified or qualified sort of way. Never again. Always worth digging around someone saying never to see if there is deception happening. He says, I answered your question because of the suspicion that's been turned on me. Now here he's letting his internal thought process out. Why do you answer a question? Because it's been asked. Because you want to deliver an answer to your question. I answered your question because of the suspicion that's been turned on me, i.e. letting us into his thought process that he answered the question and took on the question because of the suspicion that's been turned on me. And it turned to me because of the inappropriate romantic that I had with Amber Fry then. So the inappropriate, and I want you to remember that word inappropriate. I know I asked you to look for you knows, which are coming, but also look for inappropriate. The inappropriate romantic that I had with Amber Fry. That he fades out again. He's got lack of commitment to what he's saying, lack of confidence in the message that he's trying to get across. The inappropriate romantic what? He doesn't finish that off because he thinks it's bad to finish it off. Relationship, affair, tryst, all those words that he could have used, he thinks in his head don't sound great here. Inappropriate romantic that I had with Amber Fry. And you'll notice he hasn't used Lacey's name once in this interview. However, we have had Amber Fry mentioned. We've had Amber Fry mentioned by name before he uses Lacey's name. So in that first excerpt, he is not convincing. He is not giving me convincing denials here, and he's asked the big, hard questions up front. He goes general about things, and also he goes extra. So it's not just no, but it's no, and then, showing a need to persuade and a need to move the conversation potentially onto the things that he's rehearsed for, thought about, that he just cannot wait to get out because he's convinced that these are great stories and great things that he's thought of. For example, talking about the statistics that it's likely to be the ex-husband or boyfriend that has carried out the attack. He wants to get that out, which is why he brings it out, not appropriately to the question, but man, his extras are informative. One is to distract rather, and the second is to get ahead of the game. But that fading out shows low commitment to what he's saying. This is pure image and narrative management. Oh, right, are you ready for some more from him then? Stand by for one big piece of deception coming your way from Scott Peterson.
Amber Fry came forward.
I'm glad she did.
You are?
Definitely.
Why?
It's the appropriate thing to do. And it really shows what a person of character she is. And it allows us to get back looking for Lacey.
Did you tell her that you were not married?
I did. And then when Lacey disappeared, I called her, and admittedly it wasn't immediately. It was a couple days after Lacey's disappearance that I telephoned her and told her the truth.
The truth?
That I was married, that Lacey's disappeared. She didn't know about it at that point. And then she contacted the police.
Were you in love with her?
No.
Was this the first time? Are there others out there?
No.
There's no one else who can come forward?
No. I owe a tremendous apology to everyone.
Had you told anyone? Did you tell police?
Told the police immediately.
When?
That was the first night we were together. The police, I spent with the police.
You told them about her?
Yeah, from December 24th on.
The first question put to him in that segment there is Amber Fry came forward, and Diane is about to say more, but he interrupts her. A sign that he is ready to tell a story, that he's got something planned and he wants to get it out. Before the question's even finished, he can't help himself. And he says, I'm glad she did. So he's probably strategized before this interview and gone, right, I know Amber Fry is going to come up. I can't avoid it. So I'm going to say, I'm glad she came forward because it helped us get closer to finding Lacey. I'm going to look like the good guy in saying that I'm really glad Amber came forward because it helps us. So he doesn't wait for the question to finish. He goes, I'm glad they did. There's no humility there for him whatsoever, and just sitting back and waiting for what is the full question and how can I answer it honestly? You are? Says Diane. Definitely. Why? It's the appropriate thing to do. Now, remember, we had the inappropriate relationship with Amber Fry discussion earlier. Now, this is the appropriate thing to do. It's a word that Scott pulls on a lot. And I'm going to talk about that when I come to my conclusions of what I think is really going on inside Scott Peterson's head. It's the appropriate thing to do. And then he says it really shows what a person of character she is, which again is just such a strange thing to say. It just feels false. Humility. He doesn't say that's the kind of person she is, or she's a great person and I knew she would come forward, or she's a very honest person so I thought she would come forward. It really, so we've got that persuasive word there, it really shows what a person of character she is. I don't know about you, but I just think that he does not mean that in the slightest, and thinks that her character, because of what she did, is very, very bad. And it allows us to get back to looking for Lacey. So here's the look. It was a good thing. It allows us to get back to looking for Lacey. He doesn't finish the thought off, though. He doesn't say why they couldn't look for Lacey because Amber Fry hadn't spoken. He just doesn't finish that thought off. It's just a list of talking points that he's getting through. Did you ever tell her you were not married? Now, this is an interesting one. He says, I did. I did. Now we'll see him do this. I did, repeating the answer twice at the start of the answer to questions, which I think is, number one, I think is persuasive. It's not just I did and hope that that gets heard. He really wants to make sure it's heard and believed. So I'm going to say it twice because then it's twice as believable. I did. Truthful people don't do that. It could also be buying himself thinking time, because inside his head, it's whirring around, his mind is doing a lot of processing, and he's finding it hard to get his brain to send the right words to his mouth to speak. So he could be repeating things as a sense of comfort while he thinks. There's another indication that he's still thinking. He's doing an the words haven't come yet, so I'm going to say And then when Lacey disappeared, I called her. So, and then is very interesting because it sounds like, did you tell her you were not married? I did. And then after I told her I was not married, I did something else, is what we would be expecting after the and then. I did. And then when Lacey disappeared, I told her she was pregnant. Or, something like that as well. The and then sounds like he's introducing a different concept, but he's actually introducing the same concept. I did, and then I did. And then when Lacey disappeared, I called her. Not authentic at all. Admittedly, it wasn't immediately. So now we're saying he didn't tell her straight away, or now he's saying he didn't tell her straight away, and it was after Lacey disappeared. It was a couple of days after Lacey's disappearance. Those are Scott's words. That's just confirming what I've said. I telephoned her and told her the truth. The truth is the question from Diane, that I was married, that Lacey had disappeared. She didn't know about it at that point. Now, that's the truth, is that I was married, that Lacey had disappeared. She didn't know about it at that point. The baby doesn't get a mention. You'll notice the fact that she was, 8.5 months? Lacey was 8.5 months pregnant, and Scott was going to be a dad. There's a lot to all of that that is not mentioned by him at all. And then she contacted the police. I'm sure that's a sore point for Scott. Were you in love with her? Says Diane. And Scott says, no. A very short, sharp answer that deals directly with the question. No extras, no attempts to explain any of his feelings, or maybe even he felt like, I said I was in love with her, but I didn't really mean it. None of that whatsoever. Just a no. I believe that. I believe he wasn't in love with Amber. Was this the first time? Are there others out there? And he says no. Now, that's the same thing. So he's then asked, there's no one else who can come forward? Again, he says, no, I don't know this case inside out. So was he having regular affairs? Did anyone else come forward and say they were dating Scott Peterson, or was it only Amber? Because from those no's, I'm detecting an element of truth there from the guy. And then he goes extra. And this, again, I think is something that he has prepared in advance, because it doesn't relate to the question, which is there's no one else who can come forward. He says no. The extra is, I owe a tremendous apology to everyone. What, to everyone in the world? Not to your wife's family. Your wife is still alive in your head at this moment. She just needs found. I owe a tremendous apology to everyone. And you owe it. So when you owe something, you haven't paid it. Yeah? You haven't delivered it. If I owe you money, I've got the money. You don't have the money. So if I owe you an apology, you don't have the apology. I've still got it inside me. I haven't delivered it yet. Had you told anyone? Did you tell the police? Now, this is when it gets seriously crazy. He says, I told the police immediately. And it's that word immediately, which again is persuasive. It's not just I told the police, it's I told the police immediately. That sense of him wanting to get across how fast he reacted, how truthful he is by telling the police immediately. L-Y word, it ends in L-Y, usually persuasive, and always to be treated with suspicion. Because he could have just said, yeah, I told the police, because Diane didn't ask when he told the police. Did you tell the police? He could have just said, yes, I told the police immediately. You'll notice it's a yes-no question. Did you tell the police? And he doesn't say, yes, I told the police, or no, I didn't. He completely misses yes, no out the answer. Another indication the truth might not be happening. Diane gets good. He said immediately, but Diane says, when? And he says, that was the first night we were together. Which makes it sound romantic, like he was spending the night with the police. The first night we were together. Interestingly, Lacey doesn't come into this answer. So, I think what he wants to say is that's the day Lacey disappeared. But no, he talks about himself and the police. That's the priority. That's how he sees that relationship. The first night we were together, and not the first night. It was the day Lacey disappeared. I told them straight away, or anything like that. And it just does sound romantic. And I really wonder if he's mixed up his stories. So his thought process was, if I'm asked, when did I tell Amber? I'll say the first night we were together. Hey, get me, Mr. Truthful. Amber was in on this with me. If I'm asked, when did I tell the police? I'll say the day Lacey went missing. And he mixes up those two prepared stories in his head. So when he's asked, when did you tell the police? He says, the first night we were together. And then he realizes this sounds really stupid. And he says, the police, I spent with the police, trying to explain away, I think, his mistake. You told them about her? And he says, yeah, from December 24th on. Whoa, you tell someone something at a time. So you told them about her? Yeah, on December 24th. Yeah, on Christmas Eve. Yeah, the day Lacey went missing. But no, from the 24th on is what? Does that mean at some point from the 24th onwards? Does that mean every day from the 24th? It doesn't hang together. Again, this guy's having an absolute mare here, a nightmare there for anyone that doesn't know what a mare is. So in this section here, so many deceptive markers, they make me doubt if he told Amber or the police in the way that he said he did. And I know those are lies from Scott. So if he's lied to Amber and he's lied to the police, how did he tell the truth to Lacey? Or did he tell the truth to Lacey?
Did your wife find out about it?
I told my wife.
When?
In early December.
Did it cause a rupture in the marriage?
It was not a positive, obviously. It's inappropriate. But it was not something that we weren't dealing with.
A lot of arguing?
No. I can't say that even she was okay with the idea, but it wasn't anything that would break us apart.
There wasn't a lot of anger?
No.
Do you really expect people to believe that an 8.5-month pregnant woman learns her husband has had an affair and is saintly and casual about it? Accommodating? Makes a peace with it?
Well, you don't know. No one knows our relationship but us. And that's at peace with it, not happy about it.
Why did you tell her?
It was the right thing.
Because again, you know that people sitting at home have imagined that either you were in love with someone else, therefore you decided to get rid of this entanglement, namely your wife and your child, or there was just an angry confrontation.
Neither of those was the case. It's that simple.
Is it that simple? Right, let's look at what he says here. Did your wife find out about it? He's asked. It's a yes, no question. Again, he could say, yes, she did find out about it. No, she didn't find out about it. Yes, I told my wife. Instead, he just says, I told my wife, which shows, I think, a need for him to control the narrative again. It's not, yes, she found out about it, which would suggest that maybe Lacey discovered that he was having an affair. He has to say, I told my wife. Even though you weren't asked, did you tell your wife? You were asked, did your wife find out about it? When? In early December. He's asked, did it cause a rupture in the marriage? Another yes or no question, which is not met with a yes or no. So at the very end of it, the answer, we don't know whether it caused a rupture in the marriage or not. So that's a real sign that he's on image management, narrative management, rather than providing truthful answers, which will inform us. It was not a positive, obviously. It's, inappropriate. There's that word, inappropriate, again. And I really wonder why he goes to it. I do have some thoughts on it, but, inappropriate just makes it sound like, a little bit wrong, doesn't it? Not like cheating on your pregnant wife is a disgusting thing to do, a really, really terrible thing to do, and inappropriate. Does that soften it somewhat? But it was not something that we weren't dealing with. Can you tell me if there was a rupture in the marriage there? It was not positive, obviously. It's, inappropriate, but it was not something that we weren't dealing with. It's not something that we weren't dealing with. I'll come to some of that in a minute. A lot of arguing? No, he says, repeating the denial twice again. No, I can't. I can't say that even, she was okay with the idea, but it wasn't anything that would break us apart. Now, look just back on the past two answers. He spends so much time telling us what wasn't going on, a sign that things are being hidden or constructed. It's not a positive. It was inappropriate, but it was not something that we weren't dealing with. So all the negatives, they're telling us what's not going on. I can't say that. Even she was okay with the idea, but it wasn't anything that would break us apart. All the negatives tells us what's not going on. There wasn't a lot of anger, says Diane, and he says no. Now, there's that sign of truthfulness again. And you know what? There is something in there that makes me believe him, because it's so easy to give a truthful answer. There wasn't a lot of anger from Lacey? No. Potentially because she didn't know. No. There wasn't a lot of anger, so he can answer that truthfully and succinctly. Diane puts the big one to him. Do you really expect people to believe that an 8.5-month pregnant woman learns her husband has had an affair and is saintly and casual about it, accommodating, makes peace with it? And he says, well, you don't know. No one knows our relationship but us. Now, there's a red flag. Why not let us in? Why not tell us about your relationship, Scott? But no one knows about our relationship but us. That really worried me. I felt some darkness in that phrase there. And that's at peace with it, not happy about it. What does that even mean? At peace with it, not happy about it. Again, we're finding out what's not there, not happy about it. Why did you tell her? It was the right thing. Because again, people sitting at home have imagined that either you were in love with someone else, therefore you decided to get rid of this entanglement, namely your wife and child, or there was just an angry confrontation. Scott's reply is, neither of those was the case. It's that simple. Neither of those was the case. Not those things didn't happen. No, that's not what happened. Was the case. He talks about the case, which suggests to me there was a case. There was a case that he knows about, and it doesn't strictly to him fit in either of those definitions that were put to him by Diane, so he's able to say, no, that wasn't the case. But again, he's telling us what wasn't the case. He's not telling us what the case was. He's just telling us what didn't happen. So in that segment there, I don't think he volunteered any information to Lacey there, and judging by how he can't verbalise her reaction, I'm not sure that he knew. Now, we're going to come on in a minute to looking at his movements on the day that Lacey disappeared, in his words, disappeared, and he's going to make a huge, great mistake. That's coming up next. A quick pause there. If you're finding this useful, following the podcast really helps because you get to hear this kind of language regularly. You don't learn everything in one episode, you just start noticing patterns over time. And the more often you hear them, the more obvious they become without you even trying. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, following the show means new episodes land automatically and you keep building your skills in seeing and hearing deception, the truth, credibility and manipulation in someone's words. Right, let's get back to it.
Tell me about the state of your marriage. What kind of marriage was it?
God, the first word that comes to mind is, glorious. We took care of each other very well. She was amazing. She is amazing.
A neighbor says that the first thing that Lacey did every morning was pull open the curtains. But this morning, they were never pulled open.
Yeah, they were down when I returned. It's very common in the summer that she opens up the curtains. But again, we're talking about a day that, I don't know what it was, probably 40 degrees that day or something. And during the winter, we don't open the curtains to keep the house warm.
Nothing to that, nothing suspicious.
No, certainly I wish if something had happened to her in the house, I wish they'd been open so someone may have been able to stop it. But in the winter, who opens their curtains for the draft?
Another story that is out there is that the kitchen was spotless.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, there was still a wet mop around, which indicated somebody had cleaned something very recently.
Lacey was mopping the floors when I left that morning. Yes, the house is spotless. She had a cleaning lady on Monday, the 23rd.
So if the cleaning lady had been there, why have to clean again?
Dog, 2 cats, muddy backyard. She mopped those floors every day. And I emptied the bucket when I returned that afternoon.
There was one report that a neighbor had seen you loading something into a vehicle.
I haven't seen that report.
Did you load anything into a vehicle? Anything large?
Some umbrellas, some market umbrellas. Those are those, the umbrellas on the stands that are 8 feet in diameter or something like that.
When did you do that?
That morning.
Please tell me you spotted it. Please tell. We'll come to it in a second. The question that was asked first of all is, tell me about the state of your marriage. What kind of marriage was it? Diane there using the past tense, indicating where she thinks this is all going and what's happened to Lacey. Scott's reply is, God, I mean, the first word that comes to mind is, glorious. I mean, we took care of each other very well. Now, instinctively, if someone asks you what the state of your relationship is, if you're being honest, you're going to say the answer straight away. It's great. Oh, we're really happy. We're having a fun time. Phew, what relationship? That's the sort of way we'll answer it. But he builds in lots of words before he says how it was. Now, if you think about yourself, that's how you might react if you've got a crappy relationship and you want to persuade people that it's actually quite good, even if that's just to avoid further questions. And he does that there. God, I mean, the first word that comes to mind is, glorious. What kind of marriage was it? Just glorious straight away would be a more instinctive answer. So this suggests, again, he's grasping for things to say. Glorious. I mean, we took care of each other very well. Now that we took care of each other very well, I think is instinctive. I think it's showing what his priority is inside the relationship, and that is taking care of each other. And I'm not going to judge that. That's maybe what many people think a good relationship is based on. It just kind of shows where Scott's head is at. And then he lets the big one go. She was amazing, is amazing, he corrects himself. He realizes he's spoken about Lacey in the past tense. Past tense, things that are no longer with us, things that have happened in the past. She was amazing. She's no longer amazing, is amazing. He realizes and corrects himself, but a big, big tell there. A neighbour says the first thing that Lacey did every morning was pull open the curtains. But this morning, they were never pulled open, is the question. He says, yeah, they were down when I returned. It's very common in summer that she opens up the curtains. But again, we're talking about a day that, I don't know what it was, probably 40 degrees that day or something. And during the winter, we don't open the curtains to keep the house warm. Now, he could have corrected the neighbour really easily there. A neighbour says that the first thing Lacey did every morning was pull open the curtains, but that morning they were never pulled open. He could have said, no, not in the winter, we don't open the curtains, we keep them closed to keep the house warm. But instead, he has to go into explanation mode. It's very common in summer that she opens up the curtains. But again, we're talking about a day that, I don't know, was probably about 40 degrees, just all the information of an explanation. And during the winter, we don't open the curtains to keep the house warm, as if he has some control over all of that. So nothing to that, nothing suspicious, says Diane. And he says, no, I mean, I certainly wish if something had happened to her in the house, I wish they'd been open so someone may have been able to stop it. But in the winter, who opens the curtains for the draft? So he's finding the tension here. He could have just said, no, I didn't think that was suspicious. Who opens the curtains for the draft is turning it on, asking this question, using social proof. Who has the curtains open in the winter? I do. I have no statistics to say whether it's a normal or abnormal thing to do. But he started to ask the question to deflect it back, to make us think about ourselves. And, oh, yeah, that is entirely natural. But also, notice that he's focused on something happening to her in the house. In his head, it's possible that something happened to her in the house. Not that Lacey left, just went, I'm off, I'm going to go somewhere else. I'm running away from you. You know, it's entirely logical to think that she knew about Amber Fry. She decided, I've had enough. I'm going away and you're never going to see me again. But no, his mind is fixated to something happening in the house. By the way, if something happened in the house, there would also be a mess potentially and someone would have cleaned it up. But that doesn't enter into his thought process when it comes to his next storytelling. Another story is that the kitchen was spotless. In fact, there was still a wet mop around, which indicated someone had cleaned up very recently. She was mopping the floors when I left that morning. Yes, the house was spotless. She had a cleaning lady on Monday 23rd. So he's into storytelling mode. Again, you can see there's no casualness about it. Yeah, she was mopping the floors when I left that morning, so that is entirely expected. And also, just an indication of where Scott sees male and female or his and Lacey's responsibilities. It's not they had a cleaning lady in on Monday the 23rd cleaning their house. It's she had a cleaning lady in on Monday the 23rd. So if the cleaning lady had been there, why have to clean again? And he gives this strange collection of nouns. Dog, 2 cats, muddy backyard. This suggests that this is someone who now is just staccato giving out some facts rather than just sitting back and having this conversation. She mopped those floors every day. Again, we can see who does the mopping. 8.5 months pregnant, and she was mopping those floors every day. In his word, he certainly wasn't helping out. And I emptied the bucket when I returned that afternoon. Now, this is pure alibi setting here. He's not asked about the bucket. The bucket has not been mentioned at all, but he feels he has to get that there because he's prepped. And if someone asks me about, the mopping and the buckets or what I did around them, I'm going to have to say, I emptied the bucket when I returned that afternoon. It's irrelevant to the conversation that we're having here, but for some reason, he feels the need to mention it. I would say that is alibi building, covering his ass, if you like. It's then put to him, there was one report that a neighbour had seen you loading something into a vehicle. Scott says, I haven't seen that report. Which is, what's that got to do with anything? It wasn't asked, have you seen that report? It is, a neighbour saw you loading something into a vehicle, i.e., did you load something into a vehicle that morning? But no, he just goes really defensive. I haven't seen that report. Did you load anything into a vehicle? Anything large? He says, some umbrellas, some market umbrellas. Those are, the umbrellas on stands, that are 8 feet in diameter or something like that. Great, but why not say that in response to there was a report, a neighbour saw you loading something onto a vehicle. The only thing I loaded onto a vehicle was some umbrellas. No, he went defensive, and then he has this big explanation and has to give us the diameters and so on of all that. When did you do that? That morning is what he said. So here, in this part here, he doesn't deal with those questions with any conviction. I've just got pure storytelling from the guy here. Alibi building, persuasive narrative management, and look what a nice guy I am, but it shows through in his language that he's not a nice guy. I wonder from all of that if he expected Lacey to look after him. That's what he said a good relationship was, people who looked after each other, and he felt he wasn't being looked after well enough with her being heavily pregnant. I do wonder if that's what's going on. One more part to look for from Scott Peterson, and it's the big one. It's the fishing trip question.
You have a very pregnant wife. And you decide to go fishing?
Mm-hmm.
What does that say about the two of you?
Well, we had plans that evening with Mom, Lacey's mom, over at her house. Frankly, Christmas preparations were done.
What did you got her for Christmas?
Oh, a Louis Vuitton wallet. But preparations were made. Her plan for the day was to prepare gingerbread cookies. My day was open to either play golf or go fishing. I chose fishing that day, which is, a choice I made, and I obviously regret now. If I could just decide to stay home, this would not have happened.
You haven't mentioned your son.
It's so hard.
Tell me about the nursery.
Can't go in there. That door is closed until there's someone to put in there. But it's ready.
Are you afraid police will arrest you?
No, I know there's no basis. I mean, I had nothing to do with her disappearance. So there's no possible evidence or anything like that.
Have they given you reason to think that you're their prime suspect?
Yeah, I mean, with with the search warrants for the cars and things like that, certainly. With a search warrant for the home, when it gets specific to a car, obviously they're looking at me.
Starts to fall apart for the guy there. You have a very pregnant wife and you decide to go fishing. What does that say about the two of you? And he says, well, we had plans that evening with Lacey's mom, he corrects himself, over at her house. Frankly, Christmas preparations were done. Were done. Stutters there on it. He doesn't answer the question. The fact you went fishing with this heavily pregnant wife on Christmas Eve, what does that say about the two of you? Now, people have all sorts of arrangements and relationships. It's very, very possible that somewhere in the world there is a woman who would not mind that, who would love her husband to go off and do this fishing trip because she's fine with that and everything's going to be all right while he's not there, and she doesn't feel the need to spend Christmas Eve with him. And he could have said that, but he avoided any answer about what it said about the two of them, and just talks about process. We had plans that evening with Lacey's mom over at her house. Frankly, Christmas preparations were done. Now, I've heard other stuff from Scott Peterson, and they weren't really done because Lacey had a lot of things to do that day, including mopping the floors, making gingerbread and so on. So he doesn't answer the question. I think the gist he wants to say is everything was done. Everything was prepared. We had all these plans, so I had free time. But when that's not the truth, we don't have the authentic experience or emotions to go with it. We find it much harder to put that into words. And he doesn't reflect the question onto Lacey. He doesn't say she was cool with it or anything like that. Just talks about things in general. What did you get her for Christmas? Oh, a Louis Vuitton wallet. And then he says, but preparations were made. Going back to this suspicion that's on him for this fishing trip. So it's not enough for him to say, yeah, I got this Louis Vuitton wallet. He has to go, but preparations were made. He doesn't want to get caught talking about Christmas presents a lot. Maybe he didn't buy very many, but he wants to reassure us that preparations were made. Therefore, he could go fishing. It was just a normal thing. Her plan for the day was to prepare gingerbread cookies. Preparing things? Thought preparations had been made. My day was open to, play golf or go fishing. I chose fishing that day, was a choice I made. This is where I think he's really falling apart. I chose fishing that day, which was a choice I made. I made a choice, so I made a choice. That's what that runs out to. He doesn't have the words here to say things authentically. He doesn't have the brain power to verbalize these things well. I chose fishing that day. I made a choice that day. I obviously regret it now. There's one of those LY words. He's being persuasive and saying he regrets what he did. That I could just decided to stay at home. That's what none of this would have happened, I think, is what he's trying to say in his words there. But even then it comes out as a mumble and it's really hard to hear what he's going to say. He doesn't believe it. He's low on commitment. I obviously regret now, I could have just decided to stay home. That's what would have happened. So then put to him, you haven't mentioned your son. And he says, kind of glibly. It's so hard. And he realizes he's talking in the past tense again. It's so hard. Tell me about the nursery. And he says, can't go in there. That door's closed until there's someone to put in there. You'll notice he drops a pronoun there. He doesn't say, I can't go in there. He says, can't go in there. Again, low commitment to what he's saying because he's dropped that pronoun. That door is closed until there's someone to put in there, but it's ready. And it's someone to put in there, not the child is ready for it, but it's ready. He's then asked, are you afraid the police will arrest you? He says no, and that's straightforward no to the question. But then he says, I know there's no basis. I had nothing to do with her disappearance. Again, it's a negative statement. No basis, nothing to do with her disappearance. By the way, I would be petrified, even if I was innocent and all this was happening, that the police would arrest me. But there's no basis. I had nothing to do with her disappearance. Very, very negative. So there's no possible evidence or anything like that. So he's into, again, no possible evidence. In his head, he's thinking in terms of evidence, not thinking in terms of finding Lacey. Concern for Lacey doesn't come through from him at all. Or the fact that, we will find out what has happened to Lacey and I'm going to be all right because I'm not the person that did it. Have they given you any reason to think that you're their prime suspect? He says, yeah. I mean, with, with the search warrant for the cars and things like that, certainly. Now, he talks about search warrants for the home a little bit later on, but the car is the first one he's brought up. So I feel that is the priority in his head for him, is the search warrant for the car is not a good thing. And that's why it's the first thing that he mentions. But, a search warrant for the home, when it gets specific to a car, obviously they're looking at, me. So in that last section there, lying is draining. He's out of energy, out of capacity to spin narratives, and it's starting to show. But his disregard for Lacey and the baby shines on through. Now, I asked you what you thought of his use of the words I'd love to see them in the comments on this platform if you can. So why does he use Is it a crutch, or is it to convince people, you're getting this? Is it to make some contact? But listen, so much there in that interview. Let me go through what I have got from it. Number one, we know he's lying, and the markers we can learn from within there are the image management, downplaying things, changing murder to disappearance, inappropriate relationships, talking about the affairs just being, not any sort of big thing. Narrative management, which is getting to subjects before being asked, when he goes extra and says things that he's not being asked for. These are stories that he wants to tell. He thinks they're very important for him to tell, so he gets them out there without them being appropriate to the question that's being asked. Defensiveness is there as well, going over and above to deny things that are put to him. He has to talk about them and defend and defend and defend. And he's definitely got prepared answers. We saw that when he interrupted one of the questions. He didn't even want to wait for the end of the question because he had that prepared answer. And also when he goes extra, these are things that he's prepared that he wants to say. That's all part of the narrative and image management. And I also think we can see his character. There's a sense of how a relationship is for him that should be taking care. I think he wanted Lacey to take care of him. He believes the woman should take care of him, that the woman should be doing the chores and the preparation for Christmas and things like that. And him golfing, fishing, doing what he wants and sitting back and being looked after. And that's my take on Scott Peterson's big national TV interview. What's yours? Let me know. You'll find all the socials listed at neveratruerword.com. There you will also find loads more episodes, including a good few in Scott Peterson and the words that this guy has used over the history of time. That's all at neveratruerword.com. And we'll see you soon for something new from Never a Truer Word. And remember, the truth is always in the words.